Hello Manchester United fans. Welcome back. What Joshua Zirkzee did before he came on summed up Manchester United's draw with Man City. The 196th Manchester derby ended 0-0 as Man United failed to score for the 12th time this season and the second time in a week. David Moyes was sat in the director's box, a reminder that Manchester United have endured worse Old Trafford derbies in recent memory. With no title challenge, no All-Manchester FA Cup final, and no threat of a managerial sacking, this was the most inconsequential derby in nearly 20 years. It lived up to its billing. United's substitute Joshua Zirkzee was so stultified he started ball juggling during his warm-up. Zirkzee briefly awoke the Stretford end with a prompt press in the 75th minute and again with a threatening half-volley. That was the second-half highlight. City's season is not completely devoid of jeopardy, with upstarts breathing down their neck. Newcastle have 2 games in hand and could leapfrog them into 5th on Monday evening. United are marooned in 13th and relegation was never a credible threat. Their regression is so stark their tactical playbook seemed to take leaves out of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's from his derby days, a back 3, midfield workhorses and mercurial forwards. The most accomplished United-related performance against City this season remains Sporting Lisbon's dismantling of them days after it was confirmed Ruben Amorim was bound for Manchester. In this sorry season of United's, they have at least gone 3 unbeaten in derbies, excluding the penalty shootout in the Community Shield. United created the better opportunities against a City side without a fear factor since the moribund Manuel Pellegrini was in charge. City supporters were audibly dismayed by how toothless they were against the worst United side in decades. United have not scored in 12 games now this season. The match ended with a United attack and a pass away from the City area. Bruno Fernandes, United's most forward-thinking performer again, punted the ball into oblivion. The last thing the humdrum occasion needed was Victor Lindelof, introduced less than an hour in. Harry Maguire's first start in 5 weeks ensured his race was run after 57 minutes. United's back 8 was comprised entirely of defensive players. A recurring issue under Amorim is he tends to overload his starting Zirkzee's with defensive-minded players. Fernandes has seesawed from playmaker to midfielder this week and was moved further forward chiefly to underpin United's pressing. Fernandes and Amorim regularly directed Alejandro Garnacho and Rasmus Højlund on their positioning. Højlund apologized for an ostensibly errant run he had made when Fernandes had the ball, yet the evidence suggested he was on for the pass. What was inexcusable of Højlund was to be dawdling outside the area when Fernandes clipped the ball in for Manuel Ugarte, a defensive midfielder, to hit his volley. Ugarte had more attempts at goal than. Football transfer rumors: Man United receive huge Antony offer, Liverpool ready €270 million double swoop. Atletico Madrid have been won over by Antony's blistering form for Real Betis and are prepared to buy the Brazilian forward from Manchester United. Diego Simeone's side would be willing to pay an initial fee of €45 million, £38.3 million, with a further €30 million, £25.5 million, available in add-ons. Chelsea have no intention of keeping João Felix once his AC Milan loan spell ends this summer, but Galatasaray are monitoring the Portuguese forward's future. Virgil van Dijk has rejected a second contract offer from Liverpool, leaving the door open for a move to Paris Saint-Germain. However, Liverpool's first-choice target to replace Van Dijk, Barcelona's Ronald Araujo, has also rebuffed the club's first offer. Real Madrid's patience with Vinicius Jr. has worn thin, prompting the Spanish giants to explore attacking alternatives. Victor Gyökeres is a name which has been floated, but Madrid would have to battle the likes of Manchester United, Arsenal, and Barcelona for the Swede's signature. Liverpool have been tipped to make a move for Freiburg right-back Kylian Sildilia as a long-term replacement for Trent Alexander-Arnold. Liverpool have made a €140 million, £119 million. Bid for Real Madrid forward Rodrigo after accepting that Mohamed Salah will leave the club, and are also preparing to send a €135 million, £115 million offer to Newcastle for Alexander Isak. In a recognition of his past misstep, Pep Guardiola is keen to bring Morgan Rogers back to Manchester City. 2 years after letting him leave for a nominal fee, the Sky Blues would be willing to pay Aston Villa £42.5 million. Bayern Munich are finalizing the details of a 5-year contract for Bournemouth centre-back Dean Huijsen, who had been a chief target for Manchester United, Chelsea and Real Madrid. Carlo Ancelotti's Real Madrid future is very much in doubt. If the Spanish giants do part ways with the Italian boss in the summer, they would consider a move to bring Zinedine Zidane back to the dugout for a third spell. Real Madrid have already begun discussions with Antonio Rudiger about a new contract on an improved salary to quash links with a move away to Saudi Arabia. Tottenham Hotspur are thought to be leading the competitive race to sign Brazilian wonder kid Ryan. Spurs will have to compete with Aston Villa, Liverpool, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, and Wolves for the Vasco da Gama forward's signature. Arsenal are ready to table an offer of £30 million for Leicester City's promising attacking midfielder Bilal El Khanis. Man United news: Ruben Amorim hits back at critical Gary Neville after transfer plan slammed. Manchester United battled to a 0-0 draw with neighbours Manchester City over the weekend, with Ruben Amorim and Gary Neville being involved in a verbal back and forth both before and after the game. Manchester United's inconsistent season continued over the weekend against near neighbours Manchester City. The two sides stumbled to a less than inspiring 0-0 draw at Old Trafford on Sunday. The game represented Ruben Amorim's first Manchester derby at Old Trafford, with the Portuguese coach now undefeated in 2 games against City since his arrival. There has of course been plenty of reaction to the draw. That includes both Gary Neville and Roy Keane giving their verdicts on the game as well as the season so far. The stalemate leaves Amorim's men 13th in the Premier League table, with attention now turning to the Europa League and their battle to earn a Champions League spot in the process. With all of that being said, take a look at all of the latest news from Old Trafford from over the past 24 hours. Amorim responds to Neville. Amorim has fired back at Neville after the latter's accusations of a love-in between the players following the below-par showings from both teams in the Manchester derby. Several individuals embraced and hugged after the final whistle, which didn't sit well with Neville, but the man in the home dugout claimed he is constantly critical. "I understand everything," said Amorim. "I understand that Gary Neville is critical about everything, so I understand that part. I also understand that we are in a moment where we are having the worst season in history. Manchester City won everything in the past, but this season they are struggling. So we are not in the best moment to give the best spectacle to every fan. When we are not fighting for the big things, of course it's different. But you have to look at it within the context of the game, and I understand the critical aspect of players who played in this game in a different way because they were fighting every time for the titles, so it's a different context." Neville slams transfer approach. On the topic of United icon Neville, he is torn into the club's transfer acumen, having pointed to 4 players who should still be at Old Trafford. Speaking before the Manchester derby, he said, "It's going to need smart recruitment. That means getting players out for good prices and getting players in who are undervalued, which is what all teams are trying to do in the league. You could field 4 players that are not at Manchester United anymore, Elanga, Rashford, Welbeck and McTominay behind them. They would do a lot better than the current players as a 4 up front. United have let players go, and I'm not saying they're the solution right now. But they've replaced players who weren't at the standard with players who are not at that level." Ruben Amorim provides fitness update on 3 key stars after Manchester derby stalemate. Manchester United failed to make their dominance count in Sunday's Manchester derby, eventually playing out a sterile goalless stalemate at Old Trafford. The hosts had 4 more shots than Manchester City and generally looked more dangerous, something Ruben Amorim alluded to after the game, but like what happened in the Nottingham Forest tie, the attackers once again failed to find their mark. The mismanagement in the transfer window has further depleted the head coach's resources, and he has had no choice but to keep playing out-of-form stars like Alejandro Garnacho and Rasmus Højlund in almost every game. But the team's overall display since the international break will give the Portuguese confidence heading into the all-important Europa League quarter-final game against Olympique Lyon. Maguire update. The Red Devils' season rides on this particular encounter, and the head coach could do with his players avoiding injury heading into the tie. Matthijs de Ligt already missed the derby as Harry Maguire started, and the England international managed 58 minutes before he was subbed off for Victor Lindelof. While it was an understandable change given the 32-year-old recently overcame an injury which had kept him out of action for a month, the ex-Leicester City star was seen hobbling off. Amorim was naturally asked about his centre-back's fitness, and he allayed fears and explained that Maguire should be fit to play against the League One side. Harry Maguire just had 60 minutes allowed from the medical department to play, so he's fit and ready to go. "So we need to be careful on this," Amorim was quoted as saying by the club website. De Ligt menu update. No, it's not an injury, it's just that we had a time that we could use Harry without any danger. We cannot lose any more players, we have to try to divide the moments between the players. We have a really important game on Thursday. Just managing him. After 60 minutes, 55 minutes is a risk and we cannot risk any player in this moment. The former Sporting CP boss was asked about De Ligt's condition as well and whether he expects Kobbie Mainoo to return for the midweek European tie. Mata, he has an injury. Let's see how long it is going to take. We'll see. Mason Mount is ready to do whatever we want. Of course, we have to look at the minutes. Kobbie Mainoo is training with us, we want to be careful, again, with our players, but maybe he's going to be in our squad. Luke Shaw was included in the matchday squad on Sunday, which is another positive, and hopefully Amorim can get a couple of more players fit ahead of Thursday's game.